My name is Geoff Bell-Devaney, and I'm a mindfulness teacher from Western Massachusetts. And as usual, we'll just begin by taking a moment to come back to ourselves, to let go of anything that we were doing earlier today, and doing our best to give ourselves this gift of being here in this moment, in this time. And today, I'm going to be teaching you ways that we can find inner stillness, ways that we can authentically quiet the mind, ways that we can embrace challenging emotions, and ways that we can reclaim a deep sense of inner peace and presence that we perhaps have forgotten. And today I'll give you a lot of ways that we can work with reality so that we can find a deeper reality, a deeper sense of stillness and peace. So while we're waiting for the room to fill, I encourage you just to get settled and to do your best to really bring your awareness into your body. Do your best to keep your feet on the ground or wherever they may be. And in this moment, bringing your awareness to the feet, really staying grounded here. We always want to anchor ourselves here. And in this way, by bringing our awareness into the body, we can pause. We can take a moment to ground ourselves, not only in the body, like we can do in a particular area, like we are with the feet, but we can really ground ourselves in the present moment. So I encourage you to continue doing that, doing your best to gently stay with your awareness in your feet and slowly bring the awareness up the legs and just staying grounded in the lower body here for a moment. Giving yourself this gift of presence, of being with whatever may happen to be alive in this part of your reality, in the feet and the legs. And just staying here for a moment. Moving now to the midsection, the groin, the buttocks. Staying connected to the legs and the feet. And just traveling slowly upward, grounding ourselves here. Relaxing the body. Bringing a sense of ease into this experience. And now to the stomach and the chest. Staying here as well. Really broadening our awareness in this moment. The low back and the upper back, the sides of the rib cage, intentionally taking a moment here to be with ourselves, with our bodies in these ways. And now to the hands and the arms, really just scanning this whole area, allowing whatever sensations or lack of sensations there may be to be present within your awareness, and anchoring ourselves here from the whole shoulder region, arms, chest, back, all the way down the legs, really staying grounded gently here. For those just joining, we're just taking a moment to let go of our day and come into our body. We're just really staying here in whatever may be arising. And now bringing our awareness to the neck, the throat region, the sides of the neck and the back. Bring the awareness here. And now to the back of the head, sides of the head and the face region. Doing our best to direct our attention again into the body while we settle in here. And now doing our best, if we can, just to sweep through the whole body from the top of the head, just gently down the head, the neck, the shoulders, chest, stomach and back, the arms and hands, midsection, and the legs, the feet, and just staying here, And while we're grounded in the body, let's now take a moment to orient ourselves to this environment that we're in, using perhaps what we're seeing. So just take a moment to either look at me, notice something about my background, notice something in the room you're in. It doesn't matter what it is so much. It's really about grounding ourselves in the body and grounding ourselves in the present moment, using our senses, looking perhaps at an object in the room and practicing focusing in this way It's in this way we ground ourselves in the body, we ground ourselves in the environment. And you can do the same as well with the ears. We can broaden our awareness in this way. And it's in doing this, by grounding our awareness in the body, what we're seeing, what we're hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, we can slowly start to orient and find a greater sense of connection with the present moment and all of the peace and power that can only be found here. And now that we're perhaps a little more settled in, I'd like to just mention that whatever you're feeling is I encourage you to do your best to allow it and welcome it in this moment, whether you're feeling at ease or stressed or sad or whatever you're feeling, whatever's alive in this reality, do your best to just allow it to be present here. We're, in many ways, really not trying to change reality. We're trying to be with it in new ways, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So the title of this talk is Finding Inner Stillness, How to Quiet the Mind and Find Greater Peace. And I'm going to give you 3 specific ways that we can really work with that concept so that we can embody it in a much more intentional and consistent way. And the first thing to understand when we're trying to quiet the mind is we have to understand the mind. We have to understand how the mind has a tendency to be all-consuming. We can live in our heads. We can very much be lost from the moment and be living in the past or the future. We can see this when we're driving on the road, perhaps, and we don't know how we got to where we are. The last 2 miles could be a blur, and that's very reflective of how we can be in the world, but not truly be in it or with it. The mind is a brilliant tool, but it's one that's very powerful, and it can draw this awareness that we are into the past, into the future, into thinking. If we want to know deeper inner peace, we have to really start to understand how the mind works. And it's a practice like mindfulness meditation that can help us better understand the mind. It can help us better understand how the mind works. And we want to understand how the mind works because if we're not aware of it, we can so easily be lost in it. We can be lost in thinking. We can be lost in a daydream. So we have to understand that the mind is, again, a beautiful tool, but inherently the mind judges everything as good or bad or neutral. And so when we're watching the news, for example, we could see a headline that we may be averse to. Hey, Laura, welcome. Welcome, everybody. We have to recognize how the mind judges everything. If we want to find liberation from the mind, we have to really start watching it, and we have to understand how the mind, again, judges everything on a spectrum from good to bad to neutral. And of course, there's a time to use the mind, and there's a time that the mind we need that judgment. But to grow spiritually, we can easily get caught in that judgment, and we can start resisting reality. We need to know what's going on in the world, but the mind can very, very easily draw us into it. So we have to, in order to quiet the mind, we have to begin watching it. And we have to start noticing how the mind has a tendency to want to draw us into, again, the past or the future. We have to recognize when that's happening. We have to recognize how when a thought arises, it wants to draw us into story. It wants to draw us into the past or the future. And we can very easily lose touch again, not only with ourselves, our true selves, but the depth of peace in this moment. For when we're living in the mind, not only are we lost in thinking, and the more we pay attention to this, we'll begin to recognize the nature of the mind, where when a thought arises and it draws us into thinking, it draws us into story, into the past, into the future, all of a sudden, not only are we not in the present moment, but those stories, some pleasurable, some very unpleasurable. We know the mind, right? It stirs up a lot of emotions. Hey, Chris, welcome. Welcome. We have to recognize, if we want to find greater freedom from the mind, from thinking, and dwell in a state of greater peace and presence, we have to recognize how being lost in thought, being lost in story, is not only pulling us into the mind, into thoughts, but it's actually stirring up a lot of emotion. You can just have a thought of politics or someone who did you wrong or something, to notice how it isn't just the thought of the politics or the person or the situation. And this can be a situation, as we know, from 10 years ago. It can be someone that said something that hurt us a long, long time ago. And that thought still has the power not only to draw us into thinking, but to stir up a lot of emotion, a lot of anger, resistance, frustration, fear, or desire. And we can find ourselves living in this autopilot-based reality where we're not grounded in the moment, but we're living in a story. And there's a time to use the mind. And the mind is a beautiful, powerful tool when we're not lost in it. But when, like, we're driving down the road and we don't know exactly how we got here, we can start to see that we can spend our lives lost in the mind. What I'm talking about today, in many ways, is a process of waking up, authentically waking up, finding the field that Rumi talked about, that field of stillness and presence, beyond wrongdoing, beyond right doing, in order to find this deeper state of consistent presence, of stillness. We have to, again, recognize how the mind stirs up emotion, thoughts, thinking. Just, it's this loop that we can easily get caught up on, where we have a thought of someone or a situation, and then all of a sudden we're in that same anger that we felt maybe 20 years ago. So in order to find deeper inner peace and a true sense of stillness, we have to recognize how when a thought arises, we don't have to chase it. We don't have to go into thinking that we play a role, a very big part of this situation that's keeping us lost and caught up in the ego, in the mind, that's keeping us from being present, from being awake. We, in many cases, and I know this so well, we can easily contribute to our suffering. And by that I mean, when we're engaged in thinking, and most of the thinking, as we know, when we meditate, we see these consistent thoughts coming up, these repetitive, habitual thoughts they're not only not serving us, because when something happened 20 years ago and we're still thinking about it, if there's nothing we can do about it, we're just destined to live in this cycle where the thought arises, and rather than noticing it, we just unconsciously go into story and thinking about it and ruminating. And that's where anxiety, and that's where anger, that's where depression, all of these things can start to manifest, because, like I said in the beginning, the mind judges everything to be good or bad or neutral. If a thought arises, and it's one of those thoughts that's like, oh no, I don't want to think about that, all of a sudden that resistance can compound this state of suffering, where the mind it's looping in these old habitual ways and stirring up all of these old emotions. And if we want to find that field that Rumi talked about, if we want to let go of not only thinking, but all of the ancillary emotions that get stirred up in these old habitual unconscious ways of being, we simply have to really begin, first of all, and this is the power of mindfulness. It helps us open the mind. It helps us grow in wisdom. The Buddha said that there's two wings of the bird of awakening. The first wing of the bird of awakening is wisdom, which is born of mindfulness, meaning noticing how the mind works. And again, the first thing we can notice when we start really watching the mind is not only how much time we tend to spend in thinking, but how thinking can stir up this whole whirlwind of emotion. The second wing of the bird of awakening is love. We have wisdom and we have love. And love is the way that we can start to find liberation from the mind, from this unconscious pattern of thinking and generating and stirring up emotion. So as we're still focusing, we'll talk more about loving kindness and love, this other wing of the bird of awakening. But we have to, first of all, to find true peace, we have to recognize how we can get lost in thinking. And we have to start playing with this concept of what do I do when a thought arises? When a thought arises that I like, that's a tempting thought, do I go into story and think about this person or this event or this situation in the past or the future? And that's much easier to deal with than when a scary or old painful thought arises. But it has just as much potential to draw us into the past or into the future, into these states of dreaming, into story. And we have to realize that when a thought arises, we can't control that. Just like when a rain cloud comes on the horizon, we can't control that. But we do have a tremendous degree of agency in terms of how we meet those thoughts. So when a thought arises, it's really important, in my experience, to just note what happens, to note how the mind wants to draw this broad awareness that we are, wants to pull us out of the present moment, into story, into thinking, and then again watch how the emotions stir up. And we can start to see the nature of this whole machine, this whole unconscious egoic machine that's keeping us in a state of suffering, whether that's a state of pleasure or a state of peace, or a state of pleasure or a state of aversion. And we want to work with those states so that we can find authentic peace. Those states the Buddha talked about of craving, of aversion, we want to feel good. We don't want to feel good. And so much of what can find us on a path out of these old unconscious mental states is simply by recognizing, what do we do when a thought arises? Do we just blindly allow it to draw us into la-la land? And this can easily happen, especially with pleasant thoughts, but it can also happen with old painful ones. We can just find ourselves looping in these states of resentment, these old states. And it's in recognizing that, the role that we play by thinking like a noun, for example, of a thought is a noun, and we can't control that like a cloud. We can't control the stormy cloud coming in, but we can control the verb of thinking. In my experience, we have a tremendous degree of empowerment to let go of thinking, and we'll talk about how to do that more. But just like when that storm cloud is coming down the horizon, we can't control it, but we can control how we meet it. We can get an umbrella, or we can put on our raincoat. And when a stormy thought arises, we can find ways to work with that. And ultimately, that can lead us down a path, in my experience, of letting go of a tremendous amount of suffering and a tremendous amount of thinking, and help us use the mind in much more empowered and creative ways. Hey, Laura, great question. So what happens if the thought is true? So many of these old memories that arise, for example, painful memories that we all have, we're human, we have events that we've experienced that are going to still keep coming to the forefront of the mind at times. And those experiences are true. We experience those things. If there's something we can do about the situation, we can take action on it. If it's an old situation that we can't do anything about, if it's an old pain, for example, and the thought is true, we can watch how the mind really wants to hang on to that. It wants to find a sense of rightness there. This is how we can notice how the mind doesn't want to let go. The mind wants to hang on to this like it's, yes, that happened to me. That person did this when I was in grade school or 2 weeks ago, or it doesn't matter when. The mind is content. The ego doesn't care if we're suffering or happy per se. It just doesn't. It just wants us in some sort of positive or negative, craving an averse type state, right? So if the thought is true, we can take action on it if we can. If the thought is true and we can't take action, then we can move into the second step, this second wing of the bird of awakening. And this is really the whole premise of this talk, is recognizing when a thought arises, asserting whether we can take action on it. If we can't, noticing how it wants to draw us into this old looping story, which stirs up a lot of pain. And then we start to employ loving kindness, this second wing of the bird of awakening. So once we've grown in wisdom, once we've recognized mental patterns, once we've recognized the ways that we meet not only the mind and these thoughts, but situations, this is the power of mindfulness. It helps us recognize old unconscious patterns. It helps us recognize ways that we have learned, we've been conditioned through family, society, through our own experiences. We start to recognize how, in many ways, the mind has been controlling us. And it's whether the thought is true or not, we can start to realize that living in the mind isn't helping us down this path of liberation, of finding much greater authentic stillness and peace. And so we can start practicing letting go of thinking. We can start practicing when a thought arises, watching how it wants to draw us into the mind, into story. And even if it's true, oftentimes these old thoughts are ones that stir up a lot of old emotion, of course. And oftentimes that old emotion is just simply emotion that isn't integrated. In my experience, thoughts often arise as a way to stir up that emotion, that old emotion that we perhaps haven't known how to, or had the courage to, or weren't ready to be with. So thoughts, in my experience, serve a really valid purpose. And if we're not aware of how they work, we can just get caught in this old cycle of suffering, of experiencing all of these stirred up emotions. But these old emotions that arise, the fear, the regret, the sadness, the anger, all these old challenging emotions that we understandably don't want to be with, when they arise, we can start to let go of the story and come back into the body as we did in the beginning here. Ultimately, we have a choice, in my experience. We have a choice to either live in our heads, in thought, in the mind, asleep to varying degrees, running on autopilot, unaware of our patterns, our conditioning, the ways that we react to situations, the ways that we're addicted to being in story. Eckhart Tolle has said that the greatest addiction to mankind is to thinking. And the more that we start watching the way that we are drawn to thoughts and the emotions that they stir up, we can start to realize how true that is. And if we want to know true peace, we have to really start working with that. We have to start building our capacity to be present while these thoughts arise, watch them want to stir us away, and then simply come back into the body. And this second process of coming into the body with gentleness, with love, with compassion, and with courage. When a thought arises, watching how it wants to draw us into story, feeling the emotion behind the thought. And again, these thoughts are often so old. We've often been so resistant to feeling them. And it's in this act of turning towards the emotion. So much of this practice of waking up is contingent on us being willing to feel emotions that we haven't wanted to feel. So much of the addiction in our society, so much of the ways that we habitually run to temporary sources of pleasure are because we simply don't want to be with this inherently natural half of the emotional spectrum. There's joy, fun, pleasure. Those are easy to be with. It's the pain, the frustration, the sadness, the shame, the anger. These ones that societally and within us, because they're really uncomfortable, we don't want to be with them. So we run to the cookie jar. We run to the bottle of wine. We run to busying ourselves, to distracting ourselves. We run to the mind and we start thinking. We run to the phone and we scroll. And that makes so much sense because these emotions are hard to be with. But if we want to wake up, if we want to find that field that Rumi talked about, beyond wrongdoing and right doing, we have to stop judging emotions as wrong or right. We have to start, rather than running to the cookie jar, we have to start running to ourselves. And it's in this second step, this first step of being aware of how the mind works. And you can practice this. You can understand this this first step on your own. We can just begin watching how the mind works. And this second step, this step of running to ourselves with love and compassion, is how we meet the underlying emotions that understandably we've had so much trouble being with. And it's in this act of running rather than to the cookie jar or the ice cream or the whatever it may be. And our world is designed for us to run out of ourselves, to always want to feel good. But if we want to wake up, we have to realize that not only is it not always feeling good, but it's about being peaceful. And the way we feel peaceful authentically is by embracing this full spectrum, not just the ones that leave us feeling good, but the ones that are hard to be with. All of these emotions that, again, understandably, we want to push away, we want to run from. And so we have to start running to ourselves. We have to start turning courageously to these challenging emotions. And it's in this second act of employing loving kindness, of being gentle and compassionate and loving with ourselves, when these challenging emotions arise, that helps us be with them. And it helps us realize that we're bigger than them, that not only are we not these emotions, but we're not our thoughts. Everything is constantly changing. Yet when we're resisting certain parts of our experience, of course, what we resist persists, and that pain tends to just compound. And it's in turning courageously towards it, letting go of thinking so much. Even if something happened that we know shouldn't have happened, they did us wrong. Well, maybe they did. But it's what we do with that. Yes, we can take action. We can assert ourselves and try to rectify the situation. But whatever emotions arise, whatever emotions life gives us, if we want to awaken, we have to begin honoring them. We have to begin honoring this full spectrum of the human emotional experience. And we have to do so by employing this second wing of the bird of awakening, which is love. It's really hard in my experience to be with challenging emotions unless we are very courageous and very committed to doing so with gentleness and with ease, with compassion, being with these underlying emotions that arise. But the more that we can, the more we grow in peace, the more we grow in our capacity to be with whatever is arising in every moment, without judging, without wanting it to be this way or that way. And then we start to wake up, and then we're in the present moment in a way that allows us to really interact with life with much greater authenticity, with much greater empowerment, and with much greater capacity to stay in a place of peace while meeting life as it's arising within us and without. Hey, Laura, yeah, it can be challenging to be in the body. We can spend so much of our time living in the mind that we literally are living from here on up. And to be in our bodies can feel really uncomfortable. It can be challenging, especially with really big emotions, with fear, with anger, jealousy, shame, all of these emotions that we haven't wanted to be with, understandably, for our whole lives. When we decide to start turning towards them, it can be a lot. So I encourage you to be even more gentle. In many ways, this path out of the mind, this path of waking up, of finding this field beyond all wrongdoing and right doing, is a very gentle path. And this is the power of love. Mindfulness breeds wisdom. It opens the mind. Loving kindness breeds love, and it opens the heart. And it's in being profoundly gentle and courageous with ourselves when we're experiencing these really, really challenging emotions, these big, big emotions, that we can start to find liberation. It's in being with these emotions that have just wanted to come in for so long, that we haven't wanted to be with, that can help us realize that not only are we resisting uncomfortable emotions, but we're actually resisting life. And if we want to wake up, if we want to know true peace, we're not going to find it by either living in our heads or by resisting reality. Because these emotions, these sensations, this energy, this fear, this sadness, this shame, whatever it may be, if we're unwilling to tend to it, if we would, understandably, rather run to the cookie jar, we'll have temporary relief, but it's only going to be temporary. But when we start turning away from looking for temporary sources of pleasure and commit to very courageously, consistently, and compassionately being with these parts of our experience, we could say these parts of us, these challenging emotions, that we can really, in my experience, start to wake up. We can start to not only build our experience, our capacity to be with any experience, but we can deepen and broaden our capacity to do so in a way that deepens our connection to the present moment, and it deepens our connection to our ability to grow in peace and stillness. And that is the power of this practice of loving kindness. This practice of loving kindness is one of infusing our experience with peace, with love. This practice of mindfulness, again, helps us grow in wisdom. It helps us see how the mind works. That's why when we're meditating and we're watching the breath, a thought arises, we come back, we come back, we come back. It's that mind wanting to constantly draw us out of the moment that can get us in trouble, because one moment we're thinking about an ice cream cone, and then we're thinking about the summer, and then we're hating the winter, and then we're wondering how we're going to afford that vacation, and next thing you know, we're not here. We're in a place of unhappiness. And that's why the mind is really, really tricky. In my experience, it really behooves us to really start thinking of watching how the mind works. And in my experience, it's very possible to let go of so much of our thinking. And the more that we do that, invariably the mind stills, because we're not feeding it. And then when we're employing this second step of meeting the underlying emotions, again, those thoughts stir up a lot of emotions. And we can see this in our own life, right? Someone cuts us off on the way to work, and we can notice those thoughts arising throughout the day, perhaps, or a conflict with our partner or a boss or anybody, the state of the world. And we can find ourselves in this downward spiraling loop of negativity, of frustration, of resentment. The mind drawing us into these unhappy states. And the way out of that, in my personal experience, is to let go of the story, and instead of living from here up, live here down. And it's infusing our being deep into our bodies, infusing this sense of ease and gentleness and peace over and over and over. And when fear does arise, we can, like Thich Nhat Hanh said, we can be with fear and joy at the same time. If we're living in our heads, it's so easy to get lost in story and thinking, and we can get pinned to the wall in the emotions that get stirred up. And the way out of that state, we don't want to cover up the emotions, and we don't want them to be overwhelming. And that's the power of this second step, this second step to awakening, to courageously and gently be with reality. In mindfulness, we practice letting go of thinking. It's why when we're meditating, we come back to the breath, because it starts to slowly break the habit of this conditioned way of being. And we can start letting go of these old conditioned ways of being that are not serving us. We can wake up, but we can't just let go of fear. We can't just let go of desire. And we can't find stillness and peace. We cannot find the present moment in the mind. That's why this second step of loving kindness is so profoundly important, because it brings us into the body. And again, we can live in the mind, or we can live in our body. And when we're in our body, when we're grounded consistently and deeply in a very gentle and compassionate way in the body, then the mind becomes a really powerful tool, because we're not lost in it. We're not feeding it by constantly playing the game that it wants to play. come here, Geoff, come here. Think about this old thing that happened. Come on, you gotta think about it, think about it. What I do now when that happens, okay, there's the thought, ooh, I don't want to feel that. I don't want that thought, whatever it may be. Something that happened 10 years ago, who knows, that you're embarrassed about or that you regret or that someone did that hurt you or whatever it may be. We know how the mind works. Instead of running from these old thoughts, noticing them and saying, I'm gonna feel them. So much of this path of awakening is about having the courage and the conviction to feel. And it's feeling with gentleness and compassion, feeling these old emotions that keep arising. You watch the news, you're probably not going to be feeling all happy and empowered. So what do we do in these situations? Yes, we can take action. Yes, this isn't a path of passivity. And I think many people mistake waking up, this spiritual path of finding the stillness of the present moment, to be one of blind acceptance. But that can't be the case, simply because if you go to have a bowl of cereal in the morning and your milk is spoiled, you would not drink it. If you go to work and your tire is flat, you wouldn't just say, oh, well, I'm never driving my car again. So we can get really confused on the spiritual path because so much of it is about acceptance, but it's about acceptance of our emotions. And then when we have started accepting deeply all of this full spectrum of the human experience, from the success and the happiness and the joy to the sadness and the grief and the shame, once we have built and broadened our capacity to do so, which is what loving kindness helps us do. Loving kindness simply is being gentle with ourselves when our inner world is astir, in my experience. And the more gentle that we can commit to being, the more that we can constantly orient towards ease and stay there. Ease becomes our way of being. We can get so lost, in my experience, we can get so lost in the familiarity of suffering. These old childhood wounds, for example, that have brought the armor up around our hearts. These old ways of constricting, understandably, when fear arises. Yet it's that constriction, that wall that we put up. I don't want to feel the fear, so I'm going to run to the bottle of wine, the cookies, whatever it is. It's that constriction that not only keeps our hearts closed, but it prevents us from knowing the depth of stillness that can only be found by embracing this full spectrum of human emotions. When we think about it, it's like we can't control when the weather is stormy or sunny. We have our preference most often. And even there we can watch the mind. Oh, it's raining. How dare it rain on my birthday? How dare life do this, And then we can go into that funk. And this path is as much about acceptance of external reality, but primarily it's about internal reality, because the stormy weather, what it's doing, and we can see how the mind is resisting it, it's judging it to be bad. How dare it rain on my birthday? And then all of a sudden the negativity, the resentment, the anger, the frustration start stirring up. And then we're lost, then we're caught. And that's why we need to employ the second step of, okay, I would prefer this situation wasn't happening. What can I do to change it? Okay, I have a flat tire. I'll change it. But that situation in and of itself, oh my God, a flat tire, or someone cut us off. How dare they? And we can just watch the mind ramping up, wanting to use our thoughts, how it wants to keep us in this cycle. And it's meeting this state of frustration or fear or resentment or whatever may be arising. And again, this second half of the emotional spectrum. This other half, the joy, the pleasure, it's easy. It's the challenges that are challenging. And it's the challenges that can really help us awaken. And that's why when a thought arises, noticing how it wants to draw us into story, noticing how that stirs up emotions, and just saying, I'm not playing that game. This is how we find freedom and liberation from the mind. This is how we assert ourselves, how we find a tremendous degree of agency in the face of often overwhelming emotions and thoughts. Coming here down with gentleness, with compassion and tremendous courage, And recognizing that when we're feeling these challenging emotional states, it doesn't behoove us to cover them up, no matter how good that, piece of cake or whatever it may be will be. When we stuff those emotions, they're not going anywhere. They're just going to come back. When we can instead turn towards them with gentleness and compassion, then these emotions that have been wanting to be this reality that's been wanting to be acknowledged for so long begins to be met with acceptance and love and compassion. And that's how we grow spiritually, in my experience, because then we're not picking and choosing what's going on. Yes, we would rather have certain experiences and feel certain things, but this is the path of surrender. In my experience, this is the path of waking up, of getting beyond wrongdoing and right doing, of good and bad. And yes, there are things that are good and bad in the world. And again, this isn't a path of passivity. It isn't about, and many people can get lost on the spiritual path in this way. They can get down this path of, I have to accept anything that's happening from anybody or anything. But again, like the spoiled milk or the tire, life, in my experience, calls us to assert ourselves, to stand up, to speak for truth, to stand up for what we believe in. I believe in equality, racial equality, inclusion, women's rights, justice, fairness, environmental rights. We all believe in different things, these things that we value. When we see them being eroded, we don't just, acquiesce and do nothing. This path of liberation in many ways is one that empowers us even more because it gives us greater clarity. We're not caught in the resistance of what the government is doing or what that person did or what is happening. We stay much more equanimous. This path of mindfulness helps us grow in wisdom. It helps us grow in insight, in awareness and equanimity, this state of allowing reality to be as it is and working with it. This is not a path of passivity. When the tire is flat, we can notice the resistance coming up maybe, especially if we're late for work or something. And instead of allowing that resistance and those thoughts and all those emotions to ruin our day, we can watch the mind. Oh, this always happens to me. I can't believe this, blah, 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 blah. Instead, okay, this is reality. The emotion comes, and instead of getting lost in it, we allow it. We feel the anger. We reclaim it. We reclaim all the energy of all of these challenging emotions. And this is how not only do we awaken and live much more deeply in a state of stillness, for we're not resisting, we're not picking and choosing what we feel, but this is how we reclaim so much power, because it's in embracing the energy of the fear and the anger and the jealousy, the shame, all that energy that is part of our reality that we don't want to feel. We resist it, we cover it up. Instead, when we meet it gently, then those emotions start to integrate, and we start to reclaim, in my experience, all of the energy of them. So then we start to live much more deeply in the present moment because we're accepting life as it's arising. And when we do that, over time, these emotions that we've not wanted, understandably, to be with for so long start to integrate. And then we start to reclaim so much power. There's much power in fear, but we can't access it until we start being with that fear. And there's much power in being with fear and every other emotion in and of itself, because when we've practiced and when we have the capacity to be with these emotions that have for so long been ones that we've run from or covered up, then we deepen and grow our capacity to be with reality as it's arising, and we deepen through this practice of loving kindness our capacity to do so in a way that it's deepening and broadening our capacity to be peaceful and loving and compassionate with others, and much more effective. We have a tremendous degree of creative capacity when we're not lost in the mind. When we've welcomed these emotions, then we can start to awaken and find true peace and true power, in my experience. Hey, Nikki, I don't know cognitive diffusion, but I love the word diffusion. In my personal experience, that is what it's like when we turn gently towards the emotion of fear, as we would our child. If our child was running down the road and skinned their knee, we wouldn't say, hey, here, Johnny, hop on your phone for 30 minutes and cover up that feeling, or here's a pint of ice cream, or go buy some new shoes and forget about it. We would run to we would run to the child. We would, like we run to ourselves, and we would hold our child. We can't take away their pain, but we can comfort them. We can be with them. And in many ways, that is what this practice of loving kindness entails. It's running to ourselves. And oftentimes these old fears and other emotions that we haven't wanted to experience since we were children, when we first experienced them, we didn't have the capacity or the wherewithal to be with them. And that's why this practice can be profoundly liberating. It can help us grow in our capacity to be with, in a deeply loving and compassionate way, life. And then we can start to awaken, we can start to let go of thinking and these old unconscious ways of being, of resisting reality. And we can start to grow in a very tangible sense of inner peace. And the more that we practice this, instead of going into thought and resisting, we can start to be with these emotions. Our capacity to be compassionate and peaceful, at ease, deepens, and that becomes our new way of being. Again, in my experience, we can get so familiar with these patterns of resistance, understandably. These old childhood fears, for example, these old traumas that as humans we all to varying degrees experience, they can limit our capacity to know what peace is. That's why this practice of loving kindness is one that can help us remember what it's like to be in a state of peace and ease. They can help us, this practice can help us remember what it's like to not be in a state of resistance. That's why this practice is so important, because it can help, in my experience, open us to the depth of peace that is our birthright, a depth of peace that we perhaps haven't experienced since when we were little children, before this or that pain or trauma or whatever happened. And it's a very somatic experience. Most trauma work is coming into the body in these ways, orienting towards ease, being here for ourselves, like we would our child who skinned their knee. We would comfort them. And so much of this is comforting ourselves when we're in a state of suffering. And if we're experiencing fear or desire, we're suffering. And the more that we are able to be with that suffering, that pain, the more our capacity to be with, again, anything arises, but we start to grow in a tangible and deep sense of stillness and peace. For we're not resisting reality, and we're meeting it with love and compassion. And then we grow in love and compassion and stillness and peace. And then when thoughts arise, it's much easier to let go of them, because we can see how not only do they pull us into the past and the future, but they stir up a whole range of emotions. And it's much better. It's much more comfortable. It's much more enjoyable. And it's much more real to be in that sense of peace. That is our true nature. We're not meant to be in a state of constant suffering. Yes, suffering arises, and we can't control that. We can't control when an uncomfortable thought arises. But we can learn to let go of allowing it to draw us out of this broad sense of stillness that we can abide in. And we can return here, and we can stay here over and over. And the more that we do, it's like creating a new path, this gentle, easeful, peaceful path that leads us, in my experience, more and more into resting in the moment, in being with reality, being with what's arising in a very empowered and non-attached way. And when we're suffering, when fear arises, what are we going to do? Are we going to cover it up, or are we going to meet it? If our child skins their knee, are we just going to ignore them or tell them to cover it up? Or are we going to take care of them? And this in many ways is tending to our fear, tending to reality, being with these parts of us that for so long we understandably haven't wanted to be with. And the more we're able to do that, embrace this full spectrum of our emotional experience, then we can start to wake up and start to know much deeper peace and power, in my experience. Hey, Laura, how can we do it in the middle of the street with people? Was used to doing it, but lost a bit of the pause, the feeling of it's okay to put my hand on my chest and comforting myself. Okay, yeah, that's a great question. This to me is the beauty of this spiritual path. We can, if I want to get stronger, I'll go to the gym. But if I only go to the gym for 5 minutes a week, probably not going to notice much gain, right? The beauty of these practices of being mindful of when thoughts arise, watching how it draws us into thinking, noticing the strong pull, the habitual nature of that, and noticing how it stirs up these emotions, and then being with those emotions is something that we can do over and over and over throughout the day. That is the beauty of this. And this is how this becomes our way of meeting reality. When we encounter somebody in the street, if someone cuts us off when we're driving, boom, the fear comes up. The thoughts, that fucking da-da-da, it's just the reaction. And then it's like, oh, okay, I'm afraid. That was scary. We soothe ourselves, we soothe ourselves in those ways. And we do this over and over and over. And it can be a very inconspicuous thing. A very wise teacher once told me that some of the best advice I ever had was to constantly orient towards ease. When fear arises, be gentle, be easeful with it. And again, that in my personal experience can become our new way of being. And it's not weakness, it's the opposite. What's weakness is when we're resisting the fear, covering it up, or acting all macho and bravado. Tending to that fear, meeting these challenging experiences with love and compassion opens us to the power of love. It opens us to the depth of power of meeting reality. And that to me has been one of the biggest game changers in these 25 years that I've been on this spiritual path. For 24 years, I was practicing mindfulness, many retreats, watching thoughts, staying at the breath, mindful walking. And on a 6-week silent retreat a year ago, there was much pain, much emotional pain, and there's not a lot of distraction on those retreats. And that's when the whole practice of loving kindness opened up for me. And really what that practice is infusing our being with gentleness and ease, saying these phrases. And we'll practice this at the end. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be safe. May I live with ease. May I be peaceful. And may I be free of suffering. And those just sound like words. And for the first 24 years of my practice, I practiced mindfulness on retreats now and then, but they were just words. This last retreat a year ago, the teacher in the beginning said, make sure you're really feeling them, infusing these states in your body. And that was a real game changer. Because in the face of a lot of emotion, a lot of challenging emotions, we can find peace. Yet in my experience, I know very well how these emotions can be so big that they can pin us to the wall. That's why we have to assertively choose peace, infuse it in our being. And the more that we do, we start to create, in my experience, space between these emotions, which can be all-consuming. And we start to create space. And the more that we practice loving kindness, which we'll do later in a bit here, and infusing it in our being, that sense of peace and ease becomes our new way of being. It becomes familiar, and it's orienting towards ease. Again and again and again throughout the day, that we can we can remember what that state's like, and we can start to abide in that state of peace and ease, in my experience. Hey, Nikki, unhooking from thoughts, not attaching. Yeah. This is, in my personal experience, one of the most profound ways that we can practice letting go is by, there's two ways. We can, in my experience, we can watch, and it often takes a lot of painful thoughts. The thoughts aren't painful, but the emotions are, but we'll call them painful thoughts. When a painful thought arises that's really painful, we can start to realize that we can let go of needing to keep hurting ourselves by ruminating on those thoughts, which as humans, especially if they're justified, that person did that to me, that person did that, and we can go over and over, but really we're just hurting ourselves. So we can let go of thinking. And then when we're in the body, feeling these emotions, the way we let go is by letting the emotions be. The best way to let go, in my experience, is to let be. We let the thought arise, we let it be, and we let it go. And then when the emotion arises, we can't change the fear, but we can, because when we meet it with gentleness and compassion, that energy integrates because we're not resisting it. And that, in my experience, is how we let go. And then the more we do this, when thoughts arise, we start to see like, oh, okay, this is just going to keep stirring up this pain. Then we can let it go. Thich Nhat Hanh said, and I'll come back to the questions in a second. Thich Nhat Hanh said, letting go gives us freedom, and freedom is the only condition for happiness. If in our heart we still cling to anything, anger, anxiety, or possessions, we can't be free. And in my experience, the mind, as we know, can be really habitual. There can be this attraction to fear. The mind doesn't care if we're in these mental patterns and states. And it's in letting go of thinking and having the courage and the compassion to be with them that we can really start to let go. We can let go of thinking and find a tremendous degree of empowerment in our capacity to do so. And we can let go of wanting these emotions to be different. When you're sitting on a meditation cushion and a thought arises, we can let it go and be with the emotion. And it's in letting be that we let go of wanting it to be different. And that, in my experience, is how we awaken. And it takes time and it takes practice. But over time, we can start to realize that we don't have to be in these states of suffering. We can let go of, like Thich Nhat Hanh said in that quote, we can let go of clinging to anger and anxiety. And we can let go of clinging to possessions, which we often use so we don't have to feel the anxiety or whatever. So, hey, Laura. Hey, Sulaiman. Just going back here. Yeah, learning to massage and comfort the fear away one breath at a time. This doesn't happen overnight in my experience. In many ways, it's about retraining how we meet reality. Do we want to cover it up or run from it? Or do we want to be with it with gentleness and compassion and really feel, doing the somatic work here, staying here? We can either stay lost in the mind or we can wake up. And by doing that, like you're saying, Sulaiman, learning to massage and comfort it, being here, being very, very gentle. For when we're experiencing fear or any other challenging emotion, we're suffering. And what do we do when we suffer? What do we do? Do we cover it up? Or do we tend to it with compassion and love? Actually, there's another quote from Thich Nhat Hanh that I have. He says, go home to yourself by way of your mindful breathing and recognize the feelings inside. There may be feelings of anger, of fear and anxiety, or of despair. Whatever feeling is there, recognize it and embrace it very tenderly. It's like this gentle path. It's like, the Bhagavad Gita, Laura. Yeah. The war is inside, in our minds, really. Yeah, this is how, yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, Nikki, braveness. Hey, I'm glad this is helpful, Nikki. Yeah, Charlie, orient towards ease. In many ways, this is my path now of constantly orienting towards ease. When challenging emotions arise, meeting them with gentleness, with tenderness, with ease. And that, in my personal experience, becomes our new way of being. And it's in being easeful in the face of these challenging emotions that again helps us remember what it's like to be in a state of ease, which we, and I know this well, we can forget because we can get so stressed out living in this world. We can get so conditioned to resisting this or that emotion. And in my experience, the more we orient towards ease, we start to live in a state of greater ease. And then when things arise, they don't hook us as much. And over time, we start to stay in this place of peace and ease. In my experience, this is how we wake up. Again, how we find that field of stillness, of peace, of presence, and of power that Rumi talked about. This field beyond all wrongdoing and right doing. This is how, in my experience, we find our way back to the present moment, like we knew as children. And you can see this in children's eyes. They're present. And you can see in many adults' eyes, they're not present. They're lost in thinking. We all know what that's like, right? Yeah, Gary, may I be free of suffering. Yeah. Hey, Prasanna, life's not about finding an isolated quarantine. Life's all about finding all the joys in the midst of challenges by responding and strategizing our moves. Yeah, it reminds me of that quote by Thich Nhat Hanh. We can be in a state of joy and peace and also feel the emotions, these challenging emotions. In my experience, this practice doesn't leave us. Yes, it diminishes our thoughts tremendously because we stop feeding the mind. And when we stop feeding the mind, we stop experiencing all the emotions that the mind stirs up. And when we meet these emotions, they start coming in, we start welcoming them, and then they integrate. But it's not about finding zero, like total peace with zero disturbances, if I'm understanding your question or your comment correctly. Again, we can't control when a thought arises or an emotion arises, but it's how we meet it. And in my experience over time, the more we meet it with awareness and love and compassion, then we start to experience more peace. And we start to realize that the only place we will find peace is in the present moment. And then we start coming back here more and more. And this can become our new home in my experience. And it takes time. These old patterns, they want to pull us back into thinking. They want to pull us into reacting, into resisting. And we just meet them again and again. Hey, Laura. Yeah, the body knows. This is how our intuition grows as well. We start trusting ourselves. Through the practice of loving kindness, in my personal experience, we create an inner harbor within us that is one of deep and broad peace and ease. And that, in my experience, feels way better than not only pain, of course, and these old resistant patterns, but also pleasure. Our need for outer stimulation, for soothing ourselves with these temporary pleasures, which our world is designed for, diminishes because we have ourselves. And no one can give us this, no one can tend to our wounds in these ways like we can. No one can be there. No one can soothe us and calm us and meet these wounds in these same ways. And when we're experiencing an inner disturbance, an inner storm, again, we're suffering. And what do we do when that happens? Do we cover it up or run from it? Or do we run from ourselves or do we run to ourselves? And in my experience, it's running to ourselves with an open heart and an open mind, with gentleness and compassion, that we can start to heal and integrate these wounds and start to awaken and live much more deeply in the present moment in a state of much greater peace and power, for we're not lost in the mind. And we can start to see how thoughts and everything's arising within this field of awareness that we are. And we can come back here again and again and not get so easily drawn away back to sleep. May I be filled with loving kindness unconditionally. Sulaiman, I love that. Yeah, may we all be. And we'll practice this here in a minute as we close. Hey, Molly, hi. Glad you're here. I learned another phrase similar to yours. I am well, I am happy, I am peaceful. I love that. Love that. Hey, Nikki, I'm glad that this is resonating with you. I also want to say quickly, and we're going to practice this loving kindness for just briefly so we can get a sense of it. These loving kindness phrases, may I be happy, may I be healthy, can be very much a way for us to realize that even though we do have a tremendous degree of agency to meet these phrases, we have a choice to choose them. We have a choice to choose peace and ease. And it's in recognizing that we can start to find our real power and start to find freedom from the constraints of these old habitual ways of being. Silverback, hey. I will try to have a supercalifragilisticexpialidocious Sunday. Thank you. Yeah, Insight Family Unite. I'm so grateful for everyone who's here, and it's really my honor to share some of my experiences on this inner path. And again, these are my experiences. They're grounded in these practices of mindfulness, loving kindness. But I encourage you to play around with it for yourself. Only we can notice what happens when a thought arises. Do we allow it to draw us into story and whoa, look at all the emotions that get stirred up? We do this. This is our own inner experiment that we can play with, and it's the same with tending to these challenging emotions that we run from for so long, Yeah, Suleiman, we're all just walking each other home, right? Yeah. Hey, thank you, Silverback. So I think here as we wrap up, let's practice loving kindness. Let's practice this. And so I invite you, we'll just take 5 minutes. I invite you to just take a moment and get comfortable if you're not already. And I'll say these phrases. I'll say these loving kindness phrases. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be safe. May I live with ease. May I be peaceful. And we'll also do, may I be free of suffering, which is it's a compassion practice. In Pali and Buddhism, it's called karuna, compassion. The other ones are metta, loving kindness, but we can incorporate them. And I just want to preface this by saying, again, these words, may I be happy, may I be healthy, peaceful, etc., they sound perhaps light and airy-fairy, and they can also, in my experience, like I had mentioned before, they can just be words. But it's when we put them in our body. For the first 24 years of my practice, I was just saying the words. And it wasn't until the retreat a year ago where I was really feeling them that everything really shifted for me in terms of my capacity to. It helped me really realize that these phrases, may I be happy, healthy, peaceful, at ease, etc., these phrases are our inherently natural state of being when we're in the present moment, when we're resting in stillness. Our inherently natural states are love, they are peace, they are compassion, they are ease. And it's in saying these phrases in a very somatic way, bringing them into the body as we'll practice here, that can help us drive a wedge between these often old, challenging, emotional patterns and experiences of being stuck in strong emotions. And they can create and open us to the capacity that we have to infuse our being and our lives with peace and ease. And that's why it's really important as we say these phrases that we'll do now, to do so, to really feel them and to want them, to want that peace. And the mind doesn't necessarily want that. The mind doesn't care if we're in a state of peace. It wants us lost in craving and aversion. But it's coming back to these inherently natural states that we experience again when we're in the present moment. Ease and peace, and feeling them and wanting them, that we can remember what it feels like to be in those places, those states. And the more that we practice, in my personal experience, the broader and deeper those experiences become. And then we'll want to keep coming back to this practice and to that state of ease, because it feels way better to be in a state of ease and peace than it does to be lost in the mind, right? So we'll begin here, and I encourage you to really want to send that peace and ease into your body. So I'll say these 6 phrases, and if it feels right, you can repeat them after to yourself or out loud. And as you do, really feel what it's like to be in a state of peace or ease, happiness. And we'll say it 3 times to ourselves. Then we'll say it to everyone in this room, and then we'll send it across the world. This is how we do these metta practices. So we'll do 3 to ourselves, 3 to everyone in the room, 3 to the world, and then back to ourselves. So I invite you, if it feels right, to repeat after me. And you can close your eyes or keep them open. But again, I encourage you to really want peace. Thich Nhat Hanh, again, says, for those who don't know, he's a very famous Buddhist teacher. He was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize by Martin Luther King Jr. for his efforts to end the war in Vietnam. He passed away a few years ago, but he was a very preeminent mindfulness teacher. And he says that we have to choose peace as if our life depends upon it. And in many ways, our happiness, our life does. And so as we say these phrases, I encourage you to really want to feel that peace. And that can be in and of itself a real radical act, especially if we've lived in, as humans, we tend to do, a state of resistance and whatnot. So let's begin. So, may I be happy, and you can repeat that. May I be happy and really feel it. May I be healthy. May I be safe. May I live with ease and really feel, introduce ease into your body, soften here. You deserve this. May I be peaceful. May I be free of suffering. And again, may I be happy. Remember, feel it. May I be healthy. May I be safe. May I live with ease. May I be peaceful. And may I be free of suffering. And again, may I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be safe. May I live with ease. May I be peaceful. And may I be free of suffering. And now we'll do it to everybody in this live talk tonight, all of us on Insight Timer here. May you be happy. And we can open our hearts in this way, extending these well wishes outward. May you be healthy. May you be safe. May you live with ease. May you be peaceful. May you be free of suffering. Again, may you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be safe. May you live with ease. May you be peaceful. May you be free of suffering. And one more time, may you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be safe. May you live with ease. May you be peaceful. May you be free of suffering. And now let's spread these well wishes around the world to all beings, humans, animals, insects, everything. And to ourselves as well. We are part of this world. May we all be happy. May we all be healthy. May we all be safe. May we all live with ease. May we all be peaceful. And may we all be free from suffering. Again, may we all be happy. May we all be healthy. May we all be safe. May we all live with ease. May we all be peaceful. May we all be free of suffering. And again, really feeling this, really opening our hearts, feeling these feelings and broadening them around the world, sending them outward. May we all be happy. May we all be healthy. May we all be safe. May we all live with ease. And may we all be peaceful. And may we all be free from suffering. And then we'll finish by bringing it back to ourselves. May I be happy, really feeling this, wanting this. May I be healthy. May I be safe. May I live with ease. May I be peaceful. May I be free from suffering. Again, may I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be safe. May I live with ease. May I be peaceful. May I be free from suffering. And one last time, really gently here with ourselves and intentionally. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be safe. May I live with ease. May I be peaceful. May I be free from suffering. There's much power to these words in my personal experience when we feel them in our bodies. Because again, these states of peace and ease, of health, happiness, these are our inherently natural states when we are present, when we are not lost in the mind, not resisting reality. And these states are ones that we can infuse within our being that, again, give us the capacity to be with these challenging emotional states that we've long resisted and covered up. We can build, in my personal experience, we can build an inner world of peace and ease. I had a teacher once tell me that this loving kindness practice is so profound because as we start to practice mindfulness and let go, recognize and let go of these old mental patterns, these old ways of reacting to others, to the world, to these emotions that keep us caught in a state of suffering. It's the practice of loving kindness that can help us, as she put it, it's like reinforcing structures that build a new reality. One that is aligned with, again, being in this field that Rumi talked about, beyond all wrongdoing and right doing, this field of peace and presence. There's much power in this practice. And there's much beauty in it, in gentleness. And it's how we open our hearts. It's how we reclaim our capacity to be with life. And the Buddha said that we can give food to our neighbors morning, noon, and night, but if we practice loving kindness for 1 minute a day, it's more important. And the importance of that is because we need to be able to, in order to awaken, we need to be with these emotions. And in my experience, this is how we do it. We build this broad capacity to hold these emotions gently, and then we don't get lost in them. And then we can stay deeply grounded in a state of peace and ease. And then when inner storms arise, they don't sweep us away. And we stay here, and we use our anchors. What we're seeing, hearing, we constantly orient towards ease, and we constantly orient back to the present moment using our senses. And as we continue to do so over time, in my experience, we start to let go of thinking much more, and we start to live in a much deeper state of peace and ease in the present moment. It takes practice, and it takes courage. But it's much better than staying in these old ways, in ways of suffering. It's how we learn to wake up. It's how we learn to truly be, and to rest. For when we're resisting these emotions and lost in thinking, we're not at rest. When we're meeting these emotions with ease and gentleness, that becomes our way of being. And then we just start staying more and more in that place of stillness, of ease, of peace.